I'm so glad our high school game. Like, doing some more NATO tech cooperation stuff sounds. Okay.
Welcome to day 3. Hopefully we can meet our objective of 3 reses on the ballot before we leave. I think we're actually pretty close to it. I have not heard from Young as to when Young will be back today, and Jackie will not be here until 11. So I think the best place to probably start is a discussion of how we want to phrase the list options. Given research that was done last night and prior. And then we can sort of move into some of the other details, ideally closer to when maybe Jackie or Young end up coming back. So do we want to start with like how we want to end up wording AI?
I think we should just say AI or artificial intelligence. That seems to be what Truth recommends. It seems arbitrary to try to narrow it down prior to teams narrowing it down and figuring out what they want to do. So by including AI, that allows people to read whatever and build whatever kind of plan they possibly have to do.
That's sort of the sentiment that I've got as well. Does anybody want to pitch something other than artificial intelligence is the broad term? I think I like spelling out artificial intelligence over AI in the list, but
Yeah, sure.
okay, that was a lot faster of a discussion on AI than I thought it would be. All right, we'll start with nature because it may or may not encompass animals, then we can go to animals next.
Sounds good.
The definitions that I had at there, almost all of them say it includes plants and animals. If we had nature without a modifier, you could go for T, it means all, like you must be all of the parts of nature. It's not the individual, but said there are parts that said it does include individual. There are some cards that say it must be earth. There are some cards that say it doesn't have to be earth. I don't know. I feel kind of similar to how other people are feeling about AI. That's like nature is a term used in a lot of the solvency cards. It seems like if we're concerned about all of these counterfunds, I'm just as concerned about them in this area as we are in the other areas. So it seems like we should keep it broad. But that's just my sense. I haven't found a term that's better.
My concern though in revolution in a way is this like in the United States behind nature room. Like I don't know how an app just outside of saying it's in the United States combines what they do to just the United States.
So the purpose of that is to potentially limit out a recognition of an international entity or the space stuff, right? So why can't we just put nature on Earth?
I feel like adding a modifier is just not, like, you can say that unmodified means everything, but once you add modifiers, I think that argument actually becomes more difficult to make because those cards are defining the phrase nature uncountable. So like once you say it can be counted, I think that you're actually producing more problems for the next years. Just for what it's worth.
In terms of grammar, it would be wrong to add a prep phrase to a list when there's only one object in the list for the prep phrase. I don't know if that matters to anyone.
I guess the other thing is, so you feel confident that nature includes animals?
Like if I were debating, I would rather take nature includes animals than nature excludes animals, but I'm sure that there are some people who would read it excludes animals. Like I would put it in the 1 and C, but I think the app would always win.
I have like one random
I
card.
don't think there's harm to
and one of
include
the
animals in a separate list. Oh, go ahead, Drew.
Sorry, I have like one random card that it excludes it. That those are different things, and yeah, I agreed. I also don't think that there's any harm in listing it separately.
So let's say you put something like natural ecosystems.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of just saying the same thing that we were saying about AI, which is like, yeah, we can add another word that is more limiting. This is the one that is used in most of the solvency-esque cards that we have. I'm not super sure why we're trying to limit it, given that this right's concern, and it's very odd to me to say like, we need the nature area to be really small, but AI, like, do whatever the hell you want as the counterfund solve, like. that sentiment feels very contradictory, but like I don't really care.
The problem with natural ecosystems is I think it loses the state's pick all the time because there's several ecosystems even within the United States. So like each river is its own ecosystem. And so you can exclude the states that are not there and read the state's politics to set, and I don't know. It seems weird.
I was just looking for clarification.
Yeah, no, I mean, it seems like this is the most commonly used term is nature, even though it is not the best defined term. I kind of got the sense that that's where we were with other stuff, but if someone has like, wants to really push for something else, it seems fine.
Or whether like, I know we were concerned about small schools with the in the United States portion. We want to talk about that with nature. I think that it's a weird limit for the Fs because I don't think the Fs, none of the F lit talks about it that way, but
I think if we're gonna in the US, we should put it somewhere where it modifies the entire list. Just like grammatically, it makes more sense. And I get that it produces solvency issues for all of the areas, but it feels like we should have the same cross-cutting solvency issue if we're gonna make a solvency issue.
I agree with that.
Like, I don't think I would want that as the res, but if you want the phrase in the US, it seems like it should just modify the whole thing. Or throughout the US, or whatever phrase you want.
I think our concern was sort of with AI, the circumvention erg was better, although I don't know how you really circumvent, because the driverless cars in the US, would they just shut off that feature? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is like, if we want to build in the circumvention argument as coordinate ground, we should build it in as coordinate ground. But like, I don't know if we should, but.
Well, the circumvention arc is different for AI. I mean, the circumvention arc for nature is not based off of in the US, sort of.
Sort of, but like animals cross borders, natural processes cross borders, like.
Yeah.
I just don't think it's needed. I mean, most of the evidence that apps will read to be or to have a legal personhood key warrant require not being relegated solely to the US. Like, most of them probably will be, but in the case that they're not, I don't have a problem with it. Like, if you give all trees personhood and it says the US should, the US will only recognize it. Other states won't. Doesn't matter in my mind. Still links to disodds to an extent. Or just go for the K. I just think it's part of the topic.
I think the
Sorry,
only.
are we worried about like the space one still for this, or are we worried about like recognizing some natural resource in some other country?
I think it's like.
I think it's just the space. Well, I think there are two apps maybe. One is to recognize another country's already recognition of legal personhood river, so like Canada's rivers or New Zealand's or India's or whatever. I don't know if that app exists. I don't know if that app would be very good because I think it still creates the legal precedent that would apply to everything else, which means you still get your link ads. There's the space stuff. I also don't think those apps would be very good. Like, I don't think that they're unique in terms of the link things, because anything that gives personhood to a non-human object in space would also create the same precedent in the US or the domestic cases. So I'm personally not concerned about that spillover arcs, but I think some people were wanting a more narrow version.
Yeah, the space thing, I think we're in agreement about. The foreign countries thing, like I don't think we have any proof that those proposals are even a thing. And to the extent that it's different from like an AFGround perspective, that seems like maybe it gets at like a diplomatic thing where like maybe it's good for relations or something if we recognize the legal distinction that other jurisdiction is drawing. But like I can't imagine in my head a reason why it would be important for a court to do that from the perspective of like legal standing and legal rights. Like we could just diplomatically say like we agree with the sentiment of the thing that you said about your river or whatever. I don't know. I also haven't seen like a single AF card about this thing that we're worried about.
So it sounds like we get rid of it in the US, maybe?
We'll be down 2 committee members. I don't know if we can.
I'm just curious, is anyone opposed to that? Like, does anyone want in the US?
I still like to keep thinking about it.
Cool.
I'm gonna put it in brackets if that's okay. Although I guess the res B is the same thing, although it's bullet point form. But it gets rid of in the US. Do we want to talk about, are there other conversations about the nature subject? Other than, it seems like nature's the word. In the United States may or may not be attached to it. I don't think we have another option. Is there somebody that's like gung ho about another option instead of nature? Or we need to come back to that conversation?
Is there anything nature is supposed to exclude? I'm totally fine if there's not.
It's not companies, it's not states, it's not municipalities.
But like any environmental.
Nothing human-made.
Not spirits, not,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
spirits and
Did you ever
deities.
address the farm question about like whether stuff that's like environmental, but it's, you know, aquaculture or factory farming?
I didn't find cards on that, but I think that adding animal species to the list would resolve the issue.
Yeah.
Well, from my perspective, that's totally good.
We definitely have cards that say, like, any individual species could be considered rights of nature. But I don't have one that says farm animals, yes, no nature.
Sure.
But yeah, I think if the next thing on the list is non-human animal species, that would obviously include farm animals.
Yes.
And it resolves our sort of concern that there may or may not be a tea debate over nature, including excluding animals, because it seems like there's a desire for an animals debate, or at least a broad nature. So do we want to segue into the animals discussion, what we want to use for animals?
Only one question.
Yeah.
And I don't feel strongly about it, but why nature instead of ecosystem?
Because there are multiple ecosystems within the US, like each river is an ecosystem, so you lose to the state's cat of land is just have those states recognize it along the river.
Okay.
It's sort of the thought process.
Does nature allow you to do a single river, or you gotta do it to all nature?
We have cards with this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cards that say nature means all, we have cards that say nature means.
I'm just kinda curious, I'm not that.
Yeah. All right, do we want to talk about non-human animal species?
Sure. So the legal definition of animal, super broad. There's an intent to exclude humans and rocks, which was great. Got some intent to exclude, which is nice. But I realize animals alone is not enough for the resolution, probably, if we're worried about limits. Species has to be a modified term. You can't just put species in there. So either animal species or plant species is used often. Then I just did a bunch of contextual searches because there is no single definition with an intent to define non-human animal species, nor is there a definition out there with an intent to exclude aliens. I found some cards that said alien invasive species are considered an animal species, if that is a concern, but I don't think there's a way to get rid of those. And I just kind of ended up finding non-human animal species or non-human animals as the two terms of art used most often. And in my mind, the only things we can do limit-wise are stop the individual animal or the animals like Happy and his friends. So I think we do non-human animal species to at least make it such that the app has to defend the entire species of a kind of animal. Unless we want to talk about farm animals, then I think that's a bracket, but that's kind of what I found.
Do you have questions about that?
So what does non-human animal species limit out, you think?
Individual animals, so there wouldn't be the Happy the Elephant app or the Let's Help Only Elephants in Zoos app. There's most of the literature actually talks about giving all non-human animal species like access to X right. I have a bunch of sites in here. One of them was finding tort protection for all non-human animal species. So most of these people talk about all of them because that's what they believe in most. Found some kind of concerning stuff from the non-human like people organization activists on this topic area that said we actually refuse to push for legal reform, which was like a little disheartening, but I mean, If people want an animals app, I guess that's the debate you gotta have.
Do we want, so I think there's two, I feel a little bit because there's two community members that aren't here. So I have two sort of options as to where we can go. We can spend some time looking at the cards we have for those 3 terms, or we can broach the vest/grant discussion, in which we prefer. Does the committee that is here have a preference of where to go in either of those 2 routes?
I know that we're not trying to speak for the people who aren't here, but has anyone gotten an impression about if Jackie or Young care about these? Like, I've gotten the impression that Young does not care about what's the end of the list and is fine with anything other people are fine with.
Yeah, I mean, Jackie gave you her proxy for all but Res 3. So
I kind of take that to mean that they're good with the terms that we currently have, unless.
yeah.
So I don't think they'll be upset if we start talking about something else, is all.
Well, let's see, because if we could figure out the best grant rights and or duties to this version of res, then I think we have at least our first semblance of a res on the ballot. Do we want to talk about the in res 1 options, the best/grant legal rights? Personally, I did not think that I would lean this way at the beginning. If I like the best stuff better than grant, because I think that it is a more defined term. That then creates like debates, plus the best stuff is sort of like a non-revocable thing. And I think we were talking about that grant sort of could lead to questions of just acknowledgement style apps rather than like full legal rights, which is what we want the app to sort of do. But that's my opinion. I don't know where the rest of the committee stands. I know Jackie sort of does not like the vest stuff.
Seems like the term grant is used more often than this within the literature.
Maybe that's a question for you all. Do you think that the usage number is what matters the most? Oh, there's Jackie, so that helps.
I don't know if I'm pro one or pro the other. Something I've thought about though with vest being more defined, that just means there will be way more process counter plan debates because that allows people to find artificial competition based off of these definitions. Meanwhile, grant, it's used more in the literature. It might have a couple recognition apps, but it's whether or not we want to be nicer to the 2 A's or the 2 N's in my mind here.
My view on the process counter plan question is like, people are always gonna find a way to read process counter plans. So you might as well find the best defined terms so that those debates are actually good. Like, I would rather hear a good competition debate than bad competition debate.
Based off of your reading the best stuff, what do you think the competition debate looks like? Like, what do you think counterplans are enabled? You all did the most best work.
The most common competition debate will be whether vest means you have to vest all of the rights and duties in the end.
As opposed to one.
Yeah, as opposed to one or like 2. And I think the app is favored for what it's worth.
The other vest term is, it seems like we had some agreement that the vest is unconditional cards are pretty good. Which, I mean, for the purpose of talking about rights and duties, I don't know if that's a bad thing, because
That seems like a draw.
I was just, I'm fine with either term, or like putting on a res that has both. I don't think that that's gonna be the make or break thing on the topic.
Did someone say vest is more durable, or am I making that up?
Yeah.
Can you vest a duty? Is that a thing? Cool, just wanted to double check. I didn't see that used at all.
I struggle to see a rights or duties key argument that does not contain a durability key argument, to be honest.
No, I know that. I just mean like, is that language people use? I've not seen.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Jackie, I feel like my perception was you were the one that didn't like the vest the most.
Like it's a verb, it means something. I just don't know. That's not a super great reason.
I think my only concern of like putting a res that's identical except for vest versus grant on the res is, does that offer meaningful difference to the community?
Does it allow for, I'm looking at all the definitions here, but court-based solvency evidence? Yeah, the courts vest this stuff, or is it going to be?
I think certainly, right? Yeah.
Which evidence, but I mean, I just want to cover all my bases.
I mean, there won't be evidence that excludes the courts. So if there's no evidence that excludes the courts, then it will include the courts. But like courts could vest standing in someone, right? By like hearing the case.
Are we sure?
Yeah, well, I mean, fiat allows you to, the courts and specifically in nature stuff has been like, we don't think we should do that without Congress granting us approval to do that. But that's specific to the nature questions. And animals, I think.
Someone definitely already said this, and I didn't hear who, but do we have proof that vesting a duty is a thing? And to be fair, granting a duty is also kind of weird. But like,
I just Googled it and actually it is a thing. So many people will be like talking about police officers. They're like, this police officer had a vested duty, or they vested a duty in the police officer to be better, more responsive to his community.
Yeah, I also just Googled stuff for the court, and there's at least a lot of contextual uses of like the court vested X.
Yes.
Yeah.
I also don't necessarily know that, I mean, like confer, I think has the two definitions of discuss with and or grant. But I think if the phrasing is the United States should confer legal rights, I don't know how you discuss with legal rights. So
yeah.
like that may solve the confer question, and maybe I just like the word confer better than grant.
Grammatically speaking, if you confer an object, you are not conferring with an object. So you wouldn't have that discuss problem, because that would be an imprecise reading. And it doesn't make sense. Yeah, but I agree, confer is better than grant.
yeah, if vesting a duty is a thing, then that's definitely better than grant too, because I can't see, like just casually Googling granting a duty does not look like a thing all that much. Like there's a couple of random mentions, but I don't know.
Well, if the discussion's vest versus grant, or vest versus confer, then we can get rid of the two at least, right? Like, because you confer in, you mean vest in. Or do you not?
Confer powers.
Maybe just,
Yeah.
Oh, do you
I think you
confer
confer too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so our sort of conversations you vest in and you confer or grant to.
That's right.
Okay. Is there a lean? I feel like the committee's fairly indifferent on this question, which sort of gets us to that. Which
I will
version?
say, if we were concerned about duties, I mean, I'm not saying there aren't cards out there that exist, but all of the confer, bestow, grant definitions all talk about a gift, rather than a duty is a gift.
Like vest is that? Vest one? Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that was, I don't think I'll leave that out.
Sounds like yes.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, when you have say vest means all, you're talking about this Calabrese card, the unitary executive card, or sorry.
Yeah, and there's Scalia. Scalia's pretty straightforward as well, yeah.
Those are definitely about.
Ours, yes. Right, yeah, I agree.
Do we have cards about vest that are specific to the context of like rights, or is it mostly about Pres powers cards?
There's one card for sure that Brandon turned out that rights are vested in something. It may have been under a definition for rights and not for vest, but it's definitely about the two of them.
Well, vested right is a term of art. That shows up everywhere.
think that's also my concern.
Yeah, that's having an absolute right.
But I think the other question with best is, do we want the pick of not all rights?
Well, I think the thing is, you're just saying also suggests that the net would not be able to reliably.
I don't think this card is that good on the all question. I'm not saying it's not debatable, but I don't think this is like Slayer for the name
Okay.
here.
Agreed.
Alright, so,
I also think that the app standard is so strong, because it's like, it
Right.
would literally be impossible to vest all rights in any of these entities.
Right.
There's no entity that has all rights.
alright, so we're leaning vest. So res 1A, we want to talk about vest legal rights and then the and or duties portion now?
Maybe we should have one of these.
I disagree because AI duties are really important and the AI rights arguments are far worse.
So I thought sort of one of the conversations we had is that we had cards that were like legal rights includes duties.
On another person, but that's not the same as like giving a duty to an AI.
So like giving legal rights does not impose criminal liability on an AI, for instance. Okay.
No, it puts a duty on others, right? Because we have to respect their rights.
Sure.
So I don't know.
There are people who say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I don't think it's as linear.
There are also people who say that there's like the mirroring thing where if you give someone a right, that causes other people to have duties, and that's what someone was saying just now. I think there's also a bit of a concept that like the same logic that would justify giving someone rights would then necessitate that thing having duties, which would kind of be a spillover-y type of thing, but it's definitely not like literally the same thing.
Could we do a straw poll on how many voters are interested besides Garmin and putting a rights only ballot option?
I mean, there are some AI apps that are rights, right? We talked about property and stuff like that. Support that. I would like a narrower thing than what we've got going on.
That's 2.
I would, no, I don't really care.
That's 3. Is that a comeback? Maybe we come back to that question, but we focus on the do a duties version. So like once we come up with the final list, we could come back and see
Yeah, I mean, you know,
whether or not we have a rights only version.
yeah, I don't know that I would feel strongly enough to only require that everything have liabilities.
So if we took res 1A, took out the brackets in the United States, so the res would be resolved. The United States should vest legal rights and or duties in artificial intelligence, nature, and or non-human animal species. Do we have support for that on the ballot? See, 4, 5, 6. Okay. This is just a first straw poll, so not committed to anything. I'm gonna put it down in the day 3 one.
Did we take in the US out of that?
We took in the US out.
Okay, then did we actually do that with me? Like, I didn't know what we were voting on. You say things, but then there's some brackets in the middle.
Well, that's why I said without the brackets, but
And
yeah.
I'm saying,
What is it
make it look that way.
Okay, so
I got it, I'm on it.
I took it out, I put it in day 3. Do we want to straw poll? Let me scroll down to day 3. This version.
Also, it would help if people didn't all have their cursors blinking in the middle of words. That would help.
Should AI be capitalized? I don't know.
No, it's not. No.
Okay. We Resolve the United States should best legal rights and or duties in artificial intelligence, nature and or non-human animal species.
Is it better to do in one or more of the following with no double and or?
Yeah, I don't know.
That was why I did that for the other one, right, to get rid of the extra and or.
So vest legal rights and or duties in one or more of the following list. With no and or, and just 3 commas. 2 commas, sorry.
So like,
I can type it. Well, I'll copy and paste and type it right there. And I don't want to do anything else in the doc.
great. All right, so the second option then, the United States should best legal rights and or duties in one or more of the following: artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species. And I get a show of hands that agree with the second one on that list. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Jackie, were you still thinking about it? Okay.
And isn't young a vote for everyone?
See,
And so we can call them if we need a tiebreaker.
I'm gonna put that there for now. All right. Do we want to talk about a version that, I know earlier there may have been an interest of a version that did not include AI, but might include future generations in its place along the same lines of the list that we just included, and just swapping AI with future generations. I don't know if we have a wording for future generations to even support that is an idea, but I figured I would talk about that as long as we're sort of in this direction.
I have still not seen a wording anyone has done for future generations.
I have not either. I just,
There's one district that wants it on, so.
right.
We do know that.
We did tell them to do some wording work, and
In a year?
Like, I don't know. I don't feel super great about the idea of putting something that we have like no cards about defining on it. I would rather put on the word species without non-human animal.
Okay, does Matt have the ability to talk?
I will allow him to talk.
Dr. Lou, you got some cards on future generations?
Matt, are you there?
Not there, or frantically cutting future gens.
We can come back to it. Okay. Is there any support for a list that was just 2 of the things, so like the no AI, that just was nature and non-human animal species version of the list? As long as we're still sort of in the Res 1 section. Just 2 things.
I don't think we would put high up with clearly one.
This is the option to give the community in case we want to weigh out when 2 weeks from now suddenly everybody discovers AI had a lot of stuff we didn't know about and don't want.
I'm good with like rights exclusive AI, but I don't really want to like write it out entirely.
Like not even on the ballot, not giving people the choice.
I give people the choice to
The escape
exclude
hatch.
AI to only, I give people the choice to exclude AI to only rights.
Anybody else in favor of?
I mean, I don't think we would win, but I think the majority wants that. To be available. I think we're comfortable with the STEM. I think some variance in the list is fine. If we're wrong about what people want and they choose the 2 over the 3, then that's what they choose.
Can I propose a version? I'm gonna make it in.
No duties. Everything.
nature,
I'm just talking about this going on.
Yeah.
and or non-human
I would do like no
species.
AI if there was another thing. It's not just-
If we did like the E version that broadens the species portion, that's sort of the compromise.
So limiting animals just adds aliens.
Maybe, I
Well,
don't,
plants,
Well,
you add
plants.
plants.
But
although plants are probably under
Plants are
nature.
nature, right.
You
Like,
actually,
I hear a strong case for eliminating non-human and saying it includes future jets.
yeah,
But that would be species though, right? Or I guess animal species could include.
animal
humans.
species includes humans. So the way to do it would be nature and or animal species.
What are the tort criminal liability accounts for nature and animal species?
There's one that says like it was included in the animals work I did. Sent a site for it. Can non-human animals find tort protection in a human-centered common law? Is what the article was called. Pretty good.
Means that they sue humans, doesn't it?
It says non-human animals.
Find tort protection, not tort liability. Tort protection, I think, means they get to sue, engage in tort suits, so people.
I don't think anyone's trying to sue an animal though.
Well, then why do they have duties?
That duties only make sense if AI is in the res.
I agree, that's.
Right, that's what we
arguing.
were saying. It's like, yes, I would support this as this was just legal rights.
Okay, so legal rights, best legal rights in.
I put F, I would usually be fine with F. I think that Adri wants just the environment stuff. If like we have if like Dr. Lou was here, I'll just call him that. If there was like a third thing, I just think a two thing list is.
It does include all of nature. So I
I
think
mean,
that's big.
okay, fair.
I would
Yeah.
I would agree with whoever said earlier that if you limit the AI part of the area to rights only, then I think that simplifies it enough that it accommodates the concern of like if we want to pull the ripcord and just have a really directionally simple and like unified thing, because then you're just negging like AI like super intelligence rights, which is like a really broad strokes pop culture type debate where like it's really easy to get into. You like don't really need to weigh into law reviews. It does raise the question of why we have a legal rotation, but you know, that's a separate thing. Neither here nor there. No, I'm just saying like if we want to simplify the discussion a lot, I think rights with a list of 3 that includes AI simplifies it a ton. And a lot of the complexity in the AI area would be limited out by that phrasing.
Well, a lot of it's limited out by the nearest person town. Let me comment.
All right, so the 2 list thing, do we need the one or more of the following? Can we just get rid of that, say nature,
And or,
non-human animal species?
well, I think the problem is you have and or, because you want to be able to do both.
You could just totally remove one or more of the following from F though. Because there's only one and or.
No, there's, no. Yep,
Might be a ranch who wants to sue wolves. Well, I mean.
Yes.
Right.
That's absolutely right, and bears.
I don't think I'm really sure about that.
But all the name articles, the ones that are trolly, are just like, if you give a right, does that mean they have a duty? So can I sue, a deer that gores me? I don't know.
And also the property manager can sue the pets that go to the apartment instead of pet owner. That would be another case.
alright, so I will propose that we do a straw poll vote on E, which is an option without AI, and then we'll do a straw poll vote on F, with an option of rights only that includes AI. That sound reasonable?
Before you straw poll, so for E, my question is why, for the people that are pro just to, do you all need and or duties in that resolution for E? Since duty seems to be primarily for the purposes of AI, can E be written just with best legal rights?
I think so.
Probably, but I mean, again, I would not guess that we know all the things that are out there right now. I mean, there are apps about suing animals. I do think there are duties apps. I don't know what good they are, but they do exist. I don't know, can you eat them with rights?
I think you do, right?
I think you need duties with rights probably.
No, I'm saying I'm not sure duties, like, I don't think there are necessarily apps that rely on it having to be both legal rights and duties. Like, we may be losing some duties apps, I don't know how big a deal they are if we do, but they do exist, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Do a straw poll E, the non-AI version of rights and or duties.
I kind of feel like what BCH said, like, I don't think there's any chance this is gonna win, but.
Would we like, just, can I have like an hour to see if I can come up with a future generations tip? Because if we could add future generations to that list and then satisfy the people who want that, I'd be cool with E. It's just like a two thing list doesn't make a bunch of sense to me, but I could be just jackass about it.
Well, I count 4 votes.
So there are, I mean, it shouldn't be that hard to find definitions. There are definitions of that, it was the how do they get, who stands for them and stuff like that, that was getting awkward.
It seems like a decent amount of people on the West Coast want future generations, so I will try and satisfy their wants.
I feel like it looks hideous to me, and I advocate for removing and or duties and just legal rights. And then I would put nature and or non-human species.
That's what I was saying.
So if we got rid of, so if it was just yeah. So if it was just EI or whatever it is. Resolve the United States should vest legal rights in one or more of the following.
I think they're
I don't think
saying,
we need in
In
one
nature
more.
and or non-human species.
Perfect.
We need a comma,
yay, team.
Alright, so the United States, resolve the United States should vest legal rights in nature and or non-human species. Alright. So we have 5 votes.
We had 4 for the first one, we have 8.
And then do we get
So my quick question, based on many of the people who judge debate rounds in here. So you're not gonna say all nature, right? So I can pick 2 natural entities. And by that I mean it could be forests, endangered forests.
Well, non-human species gets you that, because non-human species includes plants, so you have your trees.
And it should be a system connected with each other, so you cannot name a forest, and forest can be a larger member of the larger ecosystem. So the species will include all.
Okay, what about
I think you're gonna have to have.
significant mountain ranges?
I think like you need a 2AC block to nature means all.
Yeah.
I think the app is gonna win.
People agree with that?
that's sort of my read.
I lean that way.
But like,
Because I would hate this if it has to be all.
I think that's part
That's a
of,
disaster.
that's part of the reason the app is gonna win, right? It's like, it's not just one app.
What if the 2NC says the only subset of nature you get is non-human species because it's affected in the res? We have the option of adding every other thing and it didn't.
Well, grammatically, it's not listed as a subset, it's listed as an alternative option, so it wouldn't make sense to be a subset. I
It
think
also
there's
has
a-
the classic subsets problem of like, even if the term nature does mean all, if you vested legal rights in part of nature, then the container of all of nature has also been vested with rights.
All right.
Okay.
Was that only gonna judge key nature? It's all.
You all are obligated to judge Mercedes.
There's a lot of.
Alright. So EI, resolve the United States should vest legal rights in nature and or non-human species. Can I get a show of hands? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Alright, so I count that as a 6-2.
Just a reminder, we have 4 for E, So how do we resolve that? Just I. Unless.
Is there anyone who's?
We
on
can call
E?
Young.
Yeah, I was like, are there people on E who think we need B and E1?
Is it like possible to, in 45 minutes, come back and consider adding future generations to?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Or another res that includes a list of 3 with future gens, I also think would be an option.
Yeah, I was gonna say DC. I'll remove my vote from E if
Okay,
that.
okay, no, that's, don't disconnect.
Yeah.
If EI is there, I just like it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it makes more sense than.
Yeah, nobody's talking about suing future generations. Right. We don't need duties for the future generations.
Like I said, we'll go back and do a vote once we've sort of established our topics that we want to move forward with, and then that way we get rid of duplicate things that we don't think vary anyway. So do we want to talk about F, United States invest legal rights only in artificial intelligence, nature, and/or non-human animal species? Is the option to narrow the AI portion, but include the AI portion?
I think this one needs to have in one or more of the following, because there's a list, right?
I agree with that.
I'm sorry, where are you now?
F.
Oh, just remove the colon, actually. Like just say in artificial intelligence, nature and or.
No, because that implies that artificial intelligence and nature have to go together, and then you may also add non-human species or not. I
Well,
think
it
that's
says and or,
possible.
right?
It says and or for
I think-
the part that follows
I think I'm fine with making that look like the one that we did, the first one that we did, which is one of the following, and then delete Android. So I agree with.
Yeah, just make it look the same.
United States should vest legal rights in one or more of the following: artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species.
Delete the extra one, it says in one or more one.
Oh, yeah.
Good catch. All right. We have 5 votes to continue that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right.
Okay, at some point, can we make that part of the screen a little bit bigger? Sorry, I'm really struggling over here to see applicant and people blinking in the middle of it.
I'm trying to think, is there a way to not show the comments that we have on this
I
thing?
mean, I tried to resolve one of them to make that go.
You can zoom in your screen if you want.
There's also up at the top thing where it says 100%, change that to 120, something. Thought I told you how to use
Oh.
Google Docs.
I can help you if you want.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. All right.
It's much better.
So we want to go on to option number 2. I think this was Carly's one. We've sort of figured out the list, how we want to name the list. So I think the variations of this are artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species. Is how that sort of plays out.
Yeah, gonna go on it.
Still have the, you're talking about number 2, right?
Talking about number 2, yes.
I still have the concern that sue or be sued does not grant any, right? It just says that you can sue, not that there is something that you will win if you sue. Like, it doesn't say you have bodily integrity, so it doesn't say that you'll win the case. Like, I'm not gonna block it if other people really want it, but I really don't think this resolution makes any sense.
I was doing some research last night about it, and they kind of made that argument too in a couple of cards I found. One of them I can send to others. Was a little concerning in my mind.
Just a fundamental question, who will represent them in the court? If you sue them, who will represent them in the court?
I think that question holds across every topic.
Yeah.
They have guardianship.
So I think the Pippus card that I found is from one of the animal rights people, and so it's used contextually. She says that person who is possessing legal rights of any kind along with the ability to enforce them. And she's like, welfare laws aren't rights because animals have no means to enforce. They then extend they say securing legal standing would transform welfare laws into rights. So legal standing just takes the status quo protection into a right, which is like the tiny legal change, versus giving a right which includes legal standing.
This is the Pippa's card you said?
Yes, the one I just
I'm
said.
sorry, can you say that again? I was pulling up the document.
Yeah, so the way I'm reading this was that if we had it be a capacity to sue and or be sued, that's legal standing. So giving legal standing would require a status quo protection law or welfare law to exist. So you are just tampering with an existing right, like protection, and making it into a right. So this resolution in my mind is like a tiny, tiny tinkering of the enforcement mechanism for a protection that is not having to do with personhood whatsoever.
The part of this part that's not underlined that says corporations as persons have some rights, parentheses, to sue and be sued, but not others, parentheses, they're not protected from being used instrumentally or destroyed. Really concerns me, because if the act can't say this can't be used instrumentally or destroyed, that's not topical under this res. Like, I don't even know what half of these asking. That's the concern part I have. And I think that it like
I concur with Klarman.
like I'm not planning on voting or something, but I'm like most people really want to. I don't know.
Do we feel like we have definitions of the term sue and or be sued as opposed to just cards that contextually use the phrase?
I think our best cards say the defining feature of personhood is the capacity to sue or be sued.
But that doesn't define it, right? That defines personhood.
Yeah.
I agree. I was just trying to say like that's the best part I've read about sue or be sued.
Here, it's not.
I think the argument yesterday was to sue or be sued means what it means. Like
But what it means apparently doesn't include rights.
yes. I mean, that was the concern from yesterday. I personally have not seen a card or an argument other than, I guess, it said that it may grant rights beyond that, but I've not seen evidence to that. Is this one of those ones that we put a pause on and then come back to figure out whether or not to sue and or be sued? Right.
I need to go back and look at the card thing.
Yeah, so we'll come back to this res, because my sense is I don't think that we're comfortable with what we currently know, putting that one up. But we should come back to it. Is that fair? Okay, so let's talk about number 3. US should expand the categories of entities with legal personhood.
So based on Delo's comment from last night, I would recommend changing the word category class.
I'm sorry, can you speak up?
Yeah, sure. Based on Delo's recommendation last night, I started looking into category class of entities, which is a legal term, accomplishes the same kind of intent of what I had for this, which is class of entities is used in taxonomic structures to signify hierarchical ordering, and it requires like single entities to be placed within a category of things that share the same function. So like Doug is employee is the class, and all of the lit I've been seeing seems to share that. It's been cited with that phrase, expand the class of entities in a personhood case, which was the Burwell v. Hobby Lobby case. And it was about making potential like corporate petitioners eligible within a religious exemption discussion. And they said that that kind of decision did not expand the class of entities because it didn't add new petitioners. So like there's a legal background for the phrase. And I'm about to submit some specific class of entities definitions.
Okay, I was gonna say, can we Dropbox, as far as I
Yep.
know, this stuff was only in a thread in the Slack.
Yeah, I-
Dropbox, it's
Just finishing underlining the last part and everything I put it in. So if we are down, could I propose maybe doing 4 and then coming back so that I can put that doc in?
Or we also now have like 3 outstanding things that it might be worth pausing for a few minutes to.
Yeah, to work on the future gem stuff,
Future
on the
gems,
classes
yeah,
stuff,
super-
Right.
sue it or be sued. And I thought at some point we talked about maybe expand the scope instead of expand the class.
May as well throw that on there.
Okay.
Doesn't make it. It's the same thing, that's all.
Alright, so we'll take 30 minutes, sounds sufficient to figure out that stuff. Come back at 11:30. Okay.
Like a call for a meeting.
Did we vote on this already? I understand.
The ones under day 3, at the moment, Ian said he's good with all 4 of them.
Okay.
I'll let you all.
Figure out what we want to do.
Does it make sense to have a floor of sue and or be sued when the ceiling is just rights? Isn't the be sued part of that, the duties section?
Be sued is a duty. Because the right to be
Yeah.
sued is, that's not a right.
That's what Carly just said.
What'd you say?
Carly just texted me right to be sued, not equal real.
Yeah, so I feel like if we wanted that floor ceiling model, the ceiling would have to be rights and duties.
Are we saying we're deleting and or be sued from?
No, I'm suggesting, either delete that or add duties to the ceiling.
I think it's there with duty in grade of 12.
Not in 2. Like duties is in 1, but not in 2.
Yeah, I mean, there's the legal standing, but not right to sue or be sued, and then there's also right to sue or be sued. I don't know if that's intentional, but there's some incongruity.
So we're just gonna put that in brackets.
What does this add aside from the like verbiage of suing or be sued? Like what about debating changes?
They want to limit out AFs where there is no necessary suing mechanism or being like to sue and or be sued for a duty AF. So like if the AI has a duty to have only sunny weather every day was like the concern.
But you can be sued, doesn't a duty inherently mean other people can sue you if you violate it?
That's what I think.
What's the best card we have?
I don't know all the ones that we have, but I know we had some
like
from last
6
night
last
that are all like duties of binding legal obligation.
Yeah.
And Anna did some, I think before even like the beginning of all this.
Yeah, my concern with this was the initial advantage to sue or be sued was identified as we know what it is. It's like kind of more of a common phrase in comparison to rights and duties. So like if we're adding that to rights and duties, it seems to me like we're just making the resolution more clunky for no reason.
Okay, backing up, because most of you weren't here, Carly's concern is that duties means anything. And that an app could, for instance, order AI to have a duty to monitor the weather for the military. She would rather sue or be sued if she thinks that avoids that type of app. We have thrown some of these other ones with sue or be sued as a floor, however, those are not really consistent with what Carly was talking about.
I mean,
She wants duties out.
was there ever a resolution to the initial sue or be sued thing about whether or not sue or be sued includes rights beyond like literally the ability to sue?
I don't think we've found cards that say grants no rights, is the problem with the.
No, because we got distracted by trying to remember what the hell her reason was for this in the first place, we
Sure.
started talking to her, and that's when we wound up on this other track.
Would just the would getting rid of or duties and just the legal rights solve the concern?
I asked that, and she said, oh, but we want the accountability apps.
Yeah, you wanna be able to sue AI for criminal things, because we thought that that's what the students wanted.
But then we would have to add duties. Oh, but that, if you have both, you're saying if they're both there, rights and duties, and then right to sue and or be sued, it solves the duty only without the sue mechanism.
Right, it at least creates the floor for your links.
I think duties just does include lawsuits. I'm gonna read some quotes out loud. Duty denotes a binding legal obligation, while the term responsibility is more likely used in reference to social rather than legal norms. The existence of a duty, that is, a legal obligation to conform one's conduct to a certain standard, is a matter of law to be determined by the court. DGA notes the word duty means a legal obligation, that is, an act required by the law. See duty, Black's Law, defining duty as a legal obligation that is owed or due to another.
Something that could also help is a definition that I cut of legal persons is a legal person can sue and be sued, own property, and enter into contracts, and all the definitions of how do you make a legal person? Rights and or duties. So as long as we grant a right and or duty to make a legal person,
I think the
get
Carly's
that right.
concern was that yes, there are definitions of duties that include the right to sue, there are also definitions of duties that go the other
That
way.
they are going to show up at 1, so we could just skip to.
Table this to 3, a table to go down to res 3.
They're at breakfast, they're gonna be here at 1.
Okay.
Right. It's 11:45.
Thanks, Neil.
You're welcome. Terms matter in this room.
Alright,
Great day, love.
so res 3. We talked about expand the classes of entities.
Classes of entities is not used, at least very often with like expander, I would say class.
Okay. Wills? Is that what you agree on now, DC?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I can delete the I version? Cool. We talked about expand the scope of entities with legal personhood.
I did not do work on that.
I don't know if Adrian has time to do work on that either, but
Like a protected class, I feel. Clearly, not exactly, but class seems like it works.
What was the second? I didn't hear what you said.
I was in agreement.
Okay. Yeah, what I had said initially for kind of the justification A has not really changed. The definition parts are in order. Class of entities eliminates apps that just make happy less unhappy. You have to make all of the elements happy.
I'm cool with class of entities. Would it is with the term that we want,
That felt weird.
I
Or-
don't like it.
or do we want, should expand the class of entities it recognizes as legal persons?
I'm fine with that. I'm also fine with the initial word that I put there, which was granted. I know some people did not like that is in past tense. But when I was seeing expand, like entities or eligible entities, etc., like the next verb used was always in the past tense, because that's just the way the sentence structure kind of works.
I think that, so I'm totally cool with class of entities and legal persons. I think that it maybe makes the most sense to bring back some version of recognize, given the cards that are pretty good that are like, we recognize people or ships. Maybe one other thing.
What is the phrasing?
I'm trying to think.
Recognize that.
I don't like with, but recognize is past tense, so that's weird.
I don't know if I think the past tense is weird for whatever verb is there, like.
I think it's fine.
Like, it seems to just make sentence structure sense for it to be past tense.
Sorry, what was the objection to it?
That with personhood is not a phrase used very very often.
Oh, okay, yeah, you would know far better than me. I remember that yesterday when
What
this
about
came up,
already
Truth
recognized as
said
legal
that if we
persons?
had
Because that way
a res that, committed the act of personhood,
it
that
includes
you
single
could
cap
use the
recognition
term
of
like
things
with
to
so
limit
they
out
can
some
permute
silly
stuff.
stuff.
But yeah, I don't know.
So it expands the, because if it's already recognized,
That means it also limits out the silly international apps.
does it though? Because if it has to expand the class of entities that are already recognized.
say the United
it
States
only
should
is
expand-
limited to just the ones that are already recognized.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
could
That's,
say
so
the-
not already
You could
recognized.
say the United States should
Sorry, I
expand
think
the
that's what
class
I
of
said.
non-human entities with legal personhood in the United States.
I'm confused why what if we just said not already recognized as legal persons? Because that way we don't have those tinkering international apps and don't have to worry about the tiny single state stuff.
Yeah.
It's just anything not already recognized as legal persons.
I just really hate the idea of a like negative phrase in a res. It just sounds off.
Oh, wait, Nick, that doesn't,
Yeah, that's the opposite.
that would make more non-legal
Yeah.
persons.
Yeah, the expanded class of entities. What if we just said recognized as legal persons? Like,
Yeah, which is just the past tense verb structure of recognizes in the first one.
so is it like this one is an option where it's just recognized as legal persons versus it has recognized?
So you don't want,
Yeah, I
think
don't-
you just want recognized as, because expand the class it has would imply you take ones that are already recognized and make those bigger, like more companies, more ships or whatever.
You think those ones there makes that?
No,
United
the,
States
some point, it's good now. I was
Yeah.
Okay, okay.
before,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel
So-
like you still want it though, because like rivers are recognized outside of the US.
You
Are
could
those
say-
apps
Yeah.
excluded?
You should say expand
Yes.
the class, you could say the United States should expand the class of entities it recognizes as legal persons.
I don't
You
like
could
that.
also put recognize as legal persons in the United States.
I
Yeah,
just don't
you could
think
do
we
that too.
need to add that many words to say it. Like,
I'm good with yours. It recognizes.
So,
There's a concern that, like the Ganges
That's-
River
that's
or
I.
whoever
We already have
recognizes
five.
as legal persons now, so
What?
it
Oh, that is
doesn't,
I?
it doesn't, without it doesn't limit what's recognized. So like rivers are recognized by other governments that are in the United States, so if it's recognized with no possess it, then it could exclude.
And if it's it, you do not need a past tense form. It recognizes, makes
Yeah.
more sense.
yeah, the one thing is, how would we feel about recognizes with the perm thing? Because like this is like the best possible version of the personhood pick. Because recognize is stronger than just like recognize implies that it's more than make a legal person. You're like acknowledging it as a legal person. So I don't know if the app gets to say, oh, perm to the counterplan giving rights means that we make it a legal person. If I were an egg, I would say you're not
Do you
recognizing it.
think grants is better?
but you can't say grant the
I would
class of
say,
entities.
I would say maybe the United States should expand the class of entities, like, this is kind of clunky, but just to get at the idea, it grants legal personhood
That's,
to or
I
something.
agree.
What-
Like, that's kind of what I was saying.
I'm starting to be confused as to what the distinction that we're now drawing between 3 and 4.
The purpose of three
Other than it's not
is
to
to
do
make
with
the
Yes.
personhood competitive.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is, but it's still more competitive than like 4, for example, with the like grants legal personhood. It's just like there's more of a debate about it. Like I agree the point of it is it's the more aggressive you're committed to personhood. The question is how aggressive you want to be. I mean, like you want to just be like, you could just be like expand the class of entities with the status of legal personhood in the United States, and then it's like super, super aggressive and clear. So that's all I was pointing out.
So we think that this res forces the app to recognize them as legal persons. We think that res 4 just grants the rights of legal persons without having to be.
Yes.
3 just adds
Yeah.
a set of things into the list of 3 that exists for what a legal person is.
What?
So like, there's a list of entities now that are legal persons. 3 just requires you to add something to that list. So
What
then
about,
like the vesting of rights and duty stuff becomes like, that would occur based upon the addition.
What would the objection be to the United States should expand the class of either entities or non-human entities with legal personhood in the United States? It still clearly commits the act of personhood. Like in the US means that it gets rid of the like Ecuador problem. They have to have personhood rights in the US. What would be people's thoughts?
Same problem as before where that implies that the class already has legal personhood and you're expanding that class. I will say
Hold
though,
on, are we worried about, is anybody absolutely worried about the Ecuador app? I thought,
I mean, I'm personally not that worried, but
Okay, I'm not,
We haven't seen cards, and so we don't know, but
I tried searching for it, didn't come up easily, but I just don't care about that. I only care about whether or not they're currently recognized.
That's the issue, it's not about the Ecuador app, it's that Ecuador, India recognize rivers as legal persons. So if it says, should expand the class of non-human entities recognized as legal persons, since there's no qualifier to who's doing the recognizing, since other countries recognize.
can you do rivers anymore?
And other countries recognize animals as legal persons.
wait, but
Curiosity, for the same reason class is useful for limiting, doesn't it also resolve that issue? Because they haven't recognized a class of rivers, they've recognized the
Yeah.
entities of this river.
Yeah,
it's also like, yeah, they're very, very specific about each one because there's ancestral spiritual purposes.
I'm just,
It's just, it's not all rivers.
Yeah, it's the same thing with New Zealand, like they have one river.
I think they do two.
Two, my bad. Not all rivers in
Yeah.
Australia, yeah.
They recognize their holy river and stuff.
Moving on.
Okay, so which of these versions are we talking about?
Wait, why'd we get rid of it recognizes or like it grants or whatever? Because that also solves that problem, right?
It's still there in 3A1.
Oh, I see.
and we just
I
get
see,
rid of
sorry.
without the A, like it seems like A is the 3 header now, but its categories is gone.
Okay.
I think someone also asked this yesterday, but is the United States an it?
yes, it is. We looked into this. It's definitely singular. You can use it.
Even all the 50 states is singular.
Cool.
All is a singular.
Well, like you say, the
Yeah.
Right. Because we have never had it, I think, in the resolution. So if I read the one state exclusion, that
if you read, well, you have to define United
You got any benefit
States.
of that?
The politics just add for that state? I don't know.
Well, like if the
I
nice tried to
still
remember.
think this concern about international, like, precedent making things untopical doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Since we have definition cards for class of entities that would exclude those things being considered legal persons within the class, I think we're adding a noun for no reason.
So you're
I
on
would
3.
I would advocate for the one that says the United States and it's not on there. Like you took it off, it should expand the class of entities recognized as legal persons.
So the original.
You told me to delete the record.
I did not, no, I said delete the categories one.
That one?
Yes.
Look for any one of these.
Well, we gotta figure out the human, non-human, but
Oh,
we should
no.
have a variation of it, but. Alright, so 3C. United States should expand the class of entities recognized as legal persons. Okay. Do we need a version of 3C
What
that
were we trying
says
to eliminate?
non-human?
Part of this?
What? Humans, abortion.
Future generation.
This is supposed to be the big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say I have not seen any cards that use the phrase class of non-human entities. It would make sense because like non-human is a class, but I didn't do any searching for class of non-human entities, which is what makes me hesitant to be.
Yeah, I think class of entities is fine, because also this is the best personhood pick for the neg. So let the app have more, categories. They're still gonna have to defend legal personhood keeping.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're good with not needing another variation of 3, right? Okay. 4.
Can we just strike through things that we identify as option, like subheaders that aren't the one we identify? Like,
I've compiled the ones that we've approved down here.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
So for 3, are we just taking out the ones that aren't C then and moving those down?
I moved C down to the version that
Oh,
we
I
have
see what you're
approved for
saying. It's the
consideration for
opposite
the
of what I
final.
thought. Never mind.
4.
Can we change it to the if structure?
Yeah.
So get rid of by the United States in the top level of 4, and then say it has not recognized.
Yeah, or that it does not recognize as legal persons.
It has not, or that it does not.
I think that
I don't know
is-
which is, I'm up to whatever people think is better, I don't really know.
I think that
You
adds
don't need
clarity.
that, which or anything. I'm just saying, it has not.
I think I typed what you all said, is that what you want?
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
not recognized as legal persons, is good, fine.
Okay.
Okay, do we want to vote on 4 as is, not any of the ABCs? United States should vest rights and or duties in non-human entities that is not recognized as legal persons.
Oh, we gotta add legal to Victoria.
What is this one? What's different between this? Obviously some words, I'm just telling you now, what is different from the one we just voted on?
The person that picked question.
It's
This
the
one also
legal
says
rights
non-
and or
It's
duties.
just the F has better argument for that we're only the legal rights of those,
Person
not
that picked
first.
fetuses, future generation.
I think this one was supposed to be the non-list option of number 1.
My reason for the distinction was literally if you don't have to put the word vest. I have not.
Okay,
If that helps.
we good to vote 4 or vote on 4? Yes, in favor. So I see Banky, I see Clarkman. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay,
So you have to agree on legal.
yeah.
Oh. Yeah, it does not recommend
Okay. Do we want to break for lunch and then we can come back to figure out 3 once Carly et al. Are here to resolve 3? Are there variations of the ones that we have down here that we need to add? Any to?
FG, US, is that something we have?
We
To
should
talk
talk about
about?
the USFG US discussion at some point.
Cool.
Do we want to do that before lunch?
I feel like, I don't know how long that conversation would take. Sometimes that conversation takes a long time.
I think it's worth having, I still have not seen what the Fed key warrant is outside of patents.
For two
Why,
things, the vast majority of the room, I'm the only one who has said FG, and if nobody else's position had changed, I'm not gonna say anything that's gonna change your mind at this point, so we probably don't need to have that conversation. Second, I do think before people do break, we should maybe spend 2 minutes on future generations so people can think about it.
Okay, so the TLDR in future generations is that it would probably have to say unborn future generations. Well,
I
people
don't
can
agree,
assume,
but go ahead.
Okay.
Say why.
so the reason why is because at least one person, it's 2 reasons, so at least one person says that generations can be citizens. The other reason that is more important than the citizens question is that it would allow you to specify a particular generation. So this is real, unborn would mean that we maintain a legal consideration for future people that are not yet present, but just the term future generations, in addition to citizens, could also mean like, you know, whatever comes in, I don't know what's after Gen Z right now, but whatever comes after, whatever is coming after Gen Z, we can only establish a legal right for that particular next, 15 decade or whatever class of future children. And so the term, if it were to appear in a list, it would have to be unborn to maintain permanent right for those that have not yet shown up. That said, it's in Jackie's resolution.
That's true.
So, but if we were to do it, it would have to say unborn. Otherwise, it could mean that you spec, people born in 2025, or 2035, or whatever.
Okay, I haven't cut them yet, but this is why I thought we should at least initiate the conversation before lunch. Yes, there is this one card that says that there are 3 ways you can define it, and one of them is citizens, but there's not an explanation of that. It is the reality that a lot of people, when talking about this, say, including the card in the paper that we've been banking on, which I went back and looked at and actually is fine. It's a tea debate.
That's true.
I don't think we want to throw unborn in because it obviously has a ton of baggage. I think most people do say it is the generations that are not yet born. I do think the NEG probably will have a pretty good argument that it shouldn't mean future generations as in the next Gen X, Gen Y, whatever. And I just think most people say, the reason why there's some blurring is that like the Giuliani case, the one suing for climate and stuff like that, said future generations, but also like young kids who don't really have much standing right now. I don't think for most of these, that dramatically changes. The F is still mostly about people who are not yet born, and that's what most definitions will talk about. I don't think there's like a great F sitting there that's
I like a limit to it. I'm just trying to say that, and it's not just that one card. It's also, so there's a law review that I haven't finished cutting that's titled "The Identity and Legal Rights of Future Generations," which like also makes the like Gen X, Gen Z thing. So I'm not saying it's gotta put unborn in there, because I know.
well, okay, again, I think that's a debate.
Yeah, like, cool,
I just think if we throw unborn in there, we may as well have not created a resolution that said future gens, because that's.
I agree, but I think tea debate where it's like our limit standard is better, I'm like very cool with that, so.
I'm just saying I don't like unborn.
Sure, no,
It's
I
like-
get it.
There are cards that put that in the definition.
Right,
so
exactly.
we don't need
I just
to-
think if we put
I
it
do have
in
other-
there,
yeah,
it's
I
like,
do-
why would we have wasted our time?
I do have
to
other
save
little
a spot
cards, because
on
it's
the
not gonna win if we put up, okay, so. But I would put future generations, no unborn qualifier in whatever is the second thing on there. That's like, US should vest legal rights in future generations, nature, and or non-human species.
Question I have, there are a lot of things that use future generation as an adjective for something that's not human, so like future generation of AI and stuff like that. Would we need to put future generations of humans?
Future human generations.
That is kind of fair with all the hybrid genetic engineering chimera stuff I've found too, if we're concerned about that, which is silly, but I guess is a problem.
Would that be a non-human species?
The only reason I bring this up
It is technically human.
this was identified as adding to the resolution that excluded AI. and
Depends on where
there's
you
a
draw
way
the
to
line.
make-
Tea debate.
I think we should look at that during lunch.
Okay.
Wait, sorry, the reason why we were saying that including the word unborn would be bad is because that would clearly flag the fetal personhood F as being included in this, yes?
Well, not that it would clearly reflect, because like, the fetal person at F is included in it, but it just
Right.
is putting the term unborn in a resolution is a poison pill and make sure that it's not gonna win. I think it's the bigger concern than the fetal person at F being Tom.
But are people who were gonna vote against it automatically because it says unborn? Like you said, it includes all the same substance, right? Like removing unborn only broadens it. So if someone was gonna vote against the resolution just because it includes, I'm not saying include unborn, I'm just saying I don't totally follow the reasoning there, but.
Okay, I will say the other reason is that I don't think, for instance, some of the debt app, the democracy app, the climate app, saying that you can only be unborn means that the 3-year-old can't possibly benefit from the app. Like, it just seems like like I said, the Giuliani case did include future generations, and that included some kids who are alive now. It just seems like if we want this area to be included, saying it only applies to people who are not yet born, we probably can't actually do anything about the debt right now, because that would affect people who are already somewhat born.
Also, like,
Is the intent to include the Juliana case in this part of the topic?
Not necessarily the Juliana case, but the reality is that it is very difficult to dice out of the literature small children from the references to future generations. That a lot of the literature, like for instance, if you read a single card that references the Juliana case, now you're gonna be told you don't solve because you didn't affect that group of people.
I would
Or you're
rather,
not allowed to.
I'd rather exclude
that's
small
fair.
children than include small children because they already have personhood. They already have rights.
I'm not saying we need to give them personhood, I'm saying they will say that you don't affect or you don't solve properly because you aren't allowed to give.
No, I'm.
My worry is this is the only, like, if we were to include small children, that would be the only part of any resolution where the spillover argument that we've been leaning on just categorically makes no sense. Like, if the AF is allowed to be a plan that only affects children, right? Because there are, like, they have limited personhood status, right? So, like, you could expand the ways in which they have standing potentially for some stuff.
I don't
Is
think
that the thing that we're including or no?
I don't think there are authors that say future generations are only kids that are born right now.
In addition, Truth, I think that Adri's take is that if you do read the AF that you just described, the NEG would have a strong incentive to read definitions of future generations, which define them exclusively as unborn, with a limits argument. So it would be much more difficult to win that future generations equals toddlers is like a more predictable or limiting definition than future generations is exclusively unborn. I think is maybe additionally what Adri's saying.
Okay, I'm tracking.
Is that enough for people to ponder about before lunch? Okay. So let's shoot to be back by what, 1:15? I think DCH suggested Good job. I'm on top of this.
That's fair. I just think the injury in fact requirement is like, you do not have a concrete injury because animals are property or nature is a thing that cannot have rights. I think that saying that you do have an injury in fact means that you can exercise that bucket of rights. And I think that that's like I don't know, I've read a couple law reviews in the car all the way over here, so I'm not trying to like say that I've vetted every card or every term, but I think we would maybe be doing a disservice to the fidelity of solvency cards if we don't include a component that does more than a right.
So my question
Yeah.
then, does the right to sue or be sued, or the capacity to sue or be sued, does that in any way resolve the question of standing? In terms of, okay, see, that was my thought the entire time, but like, there's a group of people that believe those are two distinct things.
Yeah, I don't think so, and I think that the best example of this is like, again, to hype Jackie's legal personhood cards. They're like, legal personhood is the capacity to sue, be sued, be property, all of that stuff, and I think that we're just taking the word personhood out of it because that's been something heavily debated by the group, and just replacing it with the capacity to sue or be sued, which is an effect of personhood, so.
We have cards that are like, that's one component of personhood, that is not all components of personhood.
What are the other ones?
They do distinguish it, so.
Because all of those nest within sue or be sued. Like
Or
all like to turn back to Friday, like the incidents of personhood card nest within sue or be sued.
Because the other incidents of personhood are rights that are established by the due process clause, rights to privacy, rights to bodily autonomy, rights to not be property, etc. So those are the other incidents of personhood. But the other thing that is the access to the
legal
suit.
person card.
I have this one.
Would it be coherent to say, vests rights and or duties by at least establishing the capacity of one or more of the following to sue and be sued?
No, that's the same problem with this, because with the ones that are now in here, because it vests the duty to sue, which is not a thing.
Okay.
What about, there's a concern the capacity of standing or scheme, and again, I don't realize what the standing to be sued is, but the capacity and standing to sue or be sued, just add and standing with capacity.
Well,
So this does have the double and or problem, which
Yeah.
some people don't like, but you could do, the US should establish the capacity to sue or be sued over rights or duties for one or more of the following, and that would keep that in place and address the concern that some people have about like, well, we wanna clearly make sure that we can give a right to the thing,
Yeah.
and then they sue over it. The downside of that is some people dislike the double and or, but it would capture everything.
What was that version? It should vest the legal capacity to sue.
Yeah, establish the capacity to sue or be sued over rights and or duties for one or more of the following. That would actually avoid the double and or if we did a list of entities. So establish the capacity to sue or be sued over legal rights and or duties for one or more of the following entities or of the following. And then we just use the normal list that we've been using.
I think that like resolves a lot of everyone's concerns.
Wouldn't you need violations of legal rights and or duties?
Yeah, I mean,
No clue on that.
Like, you have to be and or be sued, right?
Would we have sued for legal rights under duties? Or I guess you're right, violation. Sued for.
We have not vetted
violations.
violations.
I know, but I'm just like, if you don't have that modifier, like, what does the court case look like?
I think that is like a.
It should be and or be sued. Right?
Doesn't this have the same issue that you were saying earlier?
Yeah, I'm trying to like process it now that it's like written. It does establish the
Sue over
capacity
duties.
to sue for duties. So it would allow AI to challenge whether or not they ought to have duties. Which is seemingly not what we want.
Oh, you could do, okay, this is like really, I'm not saying this is great because it's really wordy and clunky, but you could do, the United States should establish the capacity to sue over violations of legal rights or be sued for duties for one or more of the following, right? Because you sue for rights and you are sued for duties. So if you split it that way, it would avoid
Okay, I'm
like,
seeing some things there.
you would avoid the choose your own adventure thing, but obviously downside of being like a word bomb.
Sue.
For rights. Or.
And or be sued for duties. Or one
I
or
still
more.
like liabilities, I think, a little bit better than duties, but I realize I like sort of missed that train of thought.
And then just do the list. Yeah, that actually doesn't look
Yeah, I
as
think
funky as I
that's-
thought.
No.
You not want legal and criminal rights, or is it just?
Legal rights, going to the compilation
I'm not
document,
sure, probably, yeah.
there are many cards that say legal rights, de facto include standing. I don't know if that now is a redundancy issue.
Well, I mean, at
That's
least that
just
means that there's
inaccurate,
a-
like-
Yeah,
Right, I mean, if it's not wrong, then it means that, hey, that gets in.
I mean, how can you sue for moral rights?
It's,
How do you
Moral
see?
rights
it's a
legal
legal
rights.
suit. Yeah, that's not a
Like,
legal,
it-
right,
Like, I just,
A
like,
legal
you
right
show up
in-
and you're like, someone wronged me, but I'm not gonna say
but
this
that's
is
a
the
moral
law.
right, not a legal right. A legal right implies the right to bring suit.
Yeah, his point was just like, you wouldn't even need legal, because the concept
Yeah.
of suing over a moral right is a non-starter, but.
A right of action does not does not de facto create standing. Like y'all just debated this on the antitrust topic. Like they have a private right of action. They have the capacity, they have the right to bring a suit, but they are often denied standing when they attempt to bring that suit. So saying that a right is automatically creates standing is inaccurate. I think I have read the Michigan parts that say like one right could be standing. So like the act could say like one of the rights that we create is standing, but it's inaccurate to say that the word right is synonymous with standing.
My thought is
Which card is
the cards that we're using to
Wild.
like operate with
Weinstein.
this is when something has the personhood, and the intrinsic part of that is the capacity to sue or be sued, right? And we have cards that say giving legal rights gives personhood as well in that same compilation. So if a resolution does not say the capacity to sue or be sued, and we are all agreeing that having personhood includes the capacity to sue or be sued, wouldn't a solution to this be that teams would just have to put, even if it's not in the resolution, with the just legal rights and or duty stuff, they would say legal rights
In the link card
of
before.
personhood.
Link it to DC.
And we do not need
Gotcha.
capacity to sue or be sued, because we have the cards already. It's what we're operating off of to justify putting it in the resolution in the first place.
L-E-Y.
So I think
Plain
the-
text wording solves, in my opinion, the important issue.
I think that the concern about that is that that plain text wording makes you susceptible to the person is big, which a bunch of people aren't really interested in making sexually.
But our explanation of
Sorry,
what
CJ,
capacity
check,
to sue or be
because
sued
you're on
is that it grants legal
As soon as
personhood.
it's your turn.
So the neg is just gonna read that, the personhood pick is inevitable. Like,
I mean, for the like fidelity to the topic paper voters, like the topic paper did say that they didn't think that legal personhood should be included in the resolution.
no, I'm not saying, like, I'm saying even without it in there, all
But
of the
there
cards
is-
we're using to
Right, Nick,
justify
there's another
either
card
of these
too.
terms,
This one too.
a team that wants to avoid having to answer the you didn't
Legal
grant
standing rights doesn't
standing
apply for every other
solvency
right.
argument, would just put personhood in their plain text. It would be topical under a legal rights res, because we have the cards that legal rights grants, is personhood. So like, I don't know why we're adding like multiple different clarifying mechanisms in these resolutions to make it so clunky, when it's just like plan wording solves solvency arguments.
Well, that's not, let's give credit and say legal right to enforce.
Yeah, like, and that's a second qualifier, but like,
Enforceability and standing, I don't think are the words and not.
Is that to the Cronin point?
Yes,
Okay.
I think for better or for worse, I think you and I just disagreed about whether or not like the app would want to put it in their plan. And I see your point about that they would be incentivized to in order to solve it.
Yeah, so like this Weinstein card seems to make both arcs. To have standing, a litigant needed a legal right to bring suit. So the legal right sort of brings about standing. The
It does not, that, like, Nick, I'm sorry, but that says the exact opposite.
Right, so the existence of concrete personal interest or injury in fact was neither a necessary nor sufficient condition for legal proceeding. I sort of get that argument. The source of law conferred a right to sue standing existed entirely independently of concrete interest. So granting them the right to sue does not give them the concrete interest or injury in fact.
So if the argument for capacity to sue and or be sued doesn't mean that it confers the ability to prove that you've been injured, which is a necessary condition for standing, what is, if the concern there is that it's the ability to be injured, what is the argument for why vesting rights proves your ability to be injured? Other than
because that's the grounds upon which injury is determined. We've cut multiple cards in the legal standing thing that says the capacity to sue and or be sued is determined based upon different things, one of which is injury. That is based upon whether or not there was a right that was violated.
Can you scroll down so I can see the rest of wines? Can you talk about this?
Yeah.
Okay, next like thought. So capacity to sue and be sued and right to sue and be sued mean the same thing if I can get Leah's agreement there. If a resolution says like establish legal rights for entities, teams would say one of the rights they establish is the right to sue and be sued.
Yes.
Plan would grant standing.
Yes.
We don't need it in the res.
Also confused, like, how the United States could establish standing for a litigant, because there are other elements of the standing test that are not just whether you have an injury. For example, for standing, you need like traceability to the remedy, I think, or causal connection between the injury and the conduct brought before the court. How can the United States like establish that?
Well, oh no. Can I just like pause that for 1 second? Y'all, this Weinstein card is DOA. It is talking about a period in which standing and a right to action were considered co-determinative with each other. And it is clearly saying that that is like not the way that it is now. It says in that period, there was a separate standing doctrine, blah, 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 blah. It was answer deciding whether Congress to have standing, like it's talking about like a time and place in which this was true. I mean, I'm not like, I guess I could see what happens in like paragraphs after that, but like, I don't think this is like the end all be all of like standing and rights are the same thing. Sorry.
And to answer your question about traceability and all of that, that's just like the function of having a lawsuit. Traceability is like someone harmed these animals. Is the harm traceable?
Yeah.
So I don't think in any of these court cases, someone said no one harmed these elephants or no one harmed these walruses. That part is established by the facts of the case. So the issue in all of those animal, nature, conferral of rights cases is whether we're able to have definitionally an injury in fact, and the court said for animals, no, because it's not your property. For nature, for like the Juliana versus United States, it said no, because it's not concrete and particularized, which is a part of the standing test. And so traceability and redressability, I don't think concern anything, because that would just be your impacts to your ass are the harm.
So you're saying the other prongs of standing are already satisfied?
I would assume that they would be for a case that had harms.
Yeah, okay.
That seems to be the legal right of equal, they could take legal action, or legal rights would allow animals to take legal action for injury done.
Yeah, exactly right. And like the redressability component is just, can you collect for damages? Like that's just like a totally like legal, like the issue, in my opinion, for all of these actors is the injury in fact requirement. Those cases I don't think said there's a lack of traceability problem for the damage done to animals or a lack of redressability because they
That actually was a case. That's why the chimpanzee case with the cell phone selfie. So like they determined that there was an economic injury, but because the chimpanzee couldn't own property, there was no way to redress. So that case got thrown out.
Okay. happy to change my totalizing statements with new information. But I do think overall, the issue in these cases is an injury in fact requirement. I think writ large. I'm sure that there's an exception to the rule, but I think most apps would want.
It's like that thing definitely created the injury.
No, it's like mostly just like, do you have an injury that the court will recognize? And it's qualified by the words like concrete, particularized, specific. And so oftentimes in these lawsuits, for example, it is a person bringing an injury on behalf of an animal. And the court is like, you don't have an injury in fact because you weren't hurt. And they're, you know what I mean? Like it's.
Nick, can you go back to Google Docs for a quick second?
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
This last wording was a nightmare.
Does this last animal one involve that?
Which wording are we on?
So this is 5.
V?
I'm just, my on-face opinion is it seems like in order to do the bring and be sued phrase in these reses, we're creating very clunky resolutions. And that's, I guess, my biggest concern. Like, and it seems like it's for, I don't know, no reason, because we all agree that suing and being sued is one of the rights. So teams would just make that one of the rights they give.
My problem with rights and duties, and maybe we could have like started here, is that those things don't really mean things. Like they do mean things, but they also don't mean things. So like the app that creates a duty for AI to monitor the weather, that's topical under the reses that you all wrote.
The top under yours too, because they would just sue the AI for not doing the weather. So like that's just a problem with the topic.
But not doing the weather isn't an existing right, right?
It's an obligation. It would be an obligation. Or a duty or whatever. So it's something they can sue over.
I don't know. So I'm looking at 5 now.
I think it's 4 or 5.
What is that, 4 or 5? Capacity.
3, 5 maybe, I don't, yeah, 2, 5, sorry. 2V.
And it just seems so not established without capacity, and it's like there's a lack of a noun. Who gets the capacity to sue for legal rights?
It would be the capacity for artificial intelligence to sue because one or
So
more of
it's
the following modifies the capacity.
The capacity to sue for all that for those.
So it's kind of weird because in that instance, you're like, hey, artificial intelligence should be able to come into court and sue and say that they deserve legal rights.
Isn't that what?
That's all of
That's
them.
what all of this, like animals, that's like the whole topic.
No, the other ones are, the other ones
That's
are.
what some of the, in some of the rights
hold
only
on.
ones.
The other ones are you establish the legal rights. It's not
I see what you're
AI
saying.
comes
So
in and
like-
says, we deserve legal rights, let's have a case.
Yeah.
And then they
So
decide
get
no.
standing and
Well, like the bucket of rights exists now. That's why I'm like so confused why we like keep coming back. Like the bucket of rights is the rights that people have. That's the whole topic.
If you have the right to sue, that doesn't mean you have a right
To sue
to
on
to
those things.
sue on there,
Yeah.
to say, yes, artificial
Those grounds don't
intelligence
apply.
gets the legal rights.
But they do people.
But you haven't made them people without legal personhood.
But those are rights for natural persons, which is a distinct categorization of rights of legal persons.
because that's my concern is
The
like,
bucket
if
of rights
standing
is for
decided
natural people.
I think what Devo
Nick,
is
also
saying makes
random
sense,
thing
is
that
like
into.
You're allowing AI to
Should be
defend
one
itself.
or more, not one more.
for legal rights, but
I-
in the
I do
case
think
they
that's all of
decide
that.
that they don't get the right.
Sorry, multiple people are talking.
Yeah, so like, so standing is decided first in the case, so like that would say like, capacity to sue grants them standing, so they get to have the case. But since it's for legal rights, the case would be, do we get this right? And then the court would say no, because most of the Solvency Act says that's like, these are unpopular, like unpalatable ideas.
In fact, you don't
Because
have
of
those
standing.
rights.
No, because like, we don't wanna make chimpanzees
You're not expanding the
considered
right.
humans.
You sued, you don't get the right.
So like they get capacity to have the trial, to be like, we deserve rights.
And I mean, I guess to that point though, I do think that the inverse is true of the rights only topic. You get the right, but then a court that doesn't like, you know what I mean, like that's just a
I mean, we
solid
think
right.
that,
Which would
we
be like
think
plan
that
would
rights
have to give
includes
right
the
of
right to
statement.
sue and or be
Right,
sued,
yeah.
which means that AFS would do both of those things. They would give the legal grounds plus give the right to sue.
The
and
court
or be
doesn't
sued.
have the right to decide you don't have the right. Like, you have to establish the right.
To your point,
Yes.
you don't have any
Sometimes the
resolution
rights-
without the double and or problem, that we've had for that, right?
But I don't know.
Oh, if we include both.
Because you were like, we should just include both, but we literally don't have,
No, I
we haven't been able to write one.
I think they say we could just include the first and not capacity to sue and be sued, because capacity to sue and be sued could be one of the rights that
Right.
you give.
Right, that's why the first ones do it, is the legal right include, one legal right is the right to sue and or be sued, which means the act give you the grounds,
If y'all
plus
feel,
the
like,
right
if
to
y'all
sue.
feel like rights and or duties is like a limiting, I don't know, like,
I don't think it's not. I don't think it is limiting. I think we had that conversation a bit earlier when we all agree, like there are so many rights. But like, I don't think that there is a solution to the
What?
problem unless we add a modifier to the rights. Personhood and people will not seem like, hey,
I mean, I truly
think
don't
that does either.
care in the abstract, I'm just like, it is my wish for the affirmatives that they can solve, so that's like that is my only perspective here.
So if you're having a T debate, then adding a duty for an artificial intelligence to monitor the weather, I don't think that.
It's a legal duty, because legal rights and or duties.
I'm just saying that on the negative side of things, don't you think that you can win that is under limiting as an interpretation? We as a negative should have duties that are more in the direction of liabilities and lawsuits and standing and stuff. I just think that the T debate's gonna be solid for the negative.
Well, I don't know though, I mean, I like do think duties often in many legal contexts have an affirmative, like obligation to do something, not just an obligation to be liable for something.
But let's say the military creates its own artificial intelligence and provides it with that duty.
Yeah.
That doesn't include lawsuits go back and forth, right?
Sorry, say again?
If the military creates its own artificial intelligence, establishes an obligation or duty to monitor the
Monitor it,
weather,
yeah.
that doesn't seem like it's legal necessarily. It seems like it's kind of internal to what the military wants. So those tiny apps that we're afraid of, is that gonna happen?
That's kind of why I like, at least my perspective yesterday was like, everybody say the apps they're like most worried about and most want, and like maybe work from there, but like.
Cool.
Alright, do we wanna, is there somebody that wants to push for one of these that then we can choose to vote on? Cause I feel like we've got an hour to go basically before I think some people have to leave to catch flights, so we need to get some stuff going on. Here, let me just see.
yeah, so 2A is no.
Is there a reason besides doubling?
What?
Is there a reason besides doubling? Or just because the combos do suit?
I mean, I don't know what any of these change over what we think rights is. If the TC's consensus is that rights equals sue it or be sued as a right, that can be conferred.
Can we just vote?
Well, that's why I want to figure out if does somebody want to push one of these to vote on, so we have one to vote on.
Somebody move to vote on one that they want.
That's what I want.
2-5.
2V? Alright, so move to vote on 2V. Resolve, the United States should establish the capacity to sue for legal rights and or be sued for duties for one or more of the following. Artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species. Everybody ready?
Yeah.
Alright, those in favor of moving it towards the ballot? 1, 2, 3. Okay. The people that didn't vote, do you need more time to think about it, or you just no? Do you want to do no votes? So people who are opposed. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I don't care.
And then we have abstention. So 3, 4, 1. So no. Okay, scroll up. Which one do you want me to scroll up to?
The by at least.
Yeah, I think that is kind of categorically different than
The
one of the
two.
ones that doesn't
2A,
sue for
2A.
rights.
2A1.
Oh, I thought Carly said 2A1 was a non-starter because
The by at least makes that less desirable, so.
It also creates a duty.
it seems like the 2A2 is the one that solves the pick.
But the right to be sued.
Yeah, if it's only a right, you can only do right to sue, but not and or be sued.
So, D'Lo, are you moving on any of these?
I can't think so.
Okay. So I think that leaves us, barring anything else we want to talk about before we move to officially approve moving these to a final slate and then approve the final slate. Does anybody have an outstanding res that is not? I'll zoom out a little bit.
Did we vote on this like vest legal like rights and or liabilities one?
We did not, because we didn't, I think the
Did we
concern with
just have
liabilities
no
was it doesn't
liability?
do
Okay.
anything different,
Okay.
was the current age.
Just looking at the other ones.
Danielle and I also did a lot of work on that together and found that duties was by far the better one if we want another word besides rights.
Okay. So outside of these, anybody pushing for anything else? And then we will vote on each of these as the secondary vote.
We don't have a federal government one.
We don't have a federal government one.
I don't think we've had that yet.
We want to have the
I thought
Fed,
we,
The hash out was like, Adrian was like, I'm the only one that wants it, so if you don't want it.
well, I thought I heard Clerman and Young would support a broad version.
Oh, okay, alright, well.
So I don't know if anybody, so should we write one, I think, to see what that looks like?
I think
I
so.
might not have been here when we did this. Did we vote on only verb we are including in like everything but the class res will be vest?
Yep.
Okay,
You
okay,
missed
that's fine, that's fine.
I was
I don't
right
care
before
about-
you showed up. We
I
didn't
figured.
go there enough,
Just
but,
making sure.
but if you wanna, I mean, if you wanna say something, you can.
I can, because my only complaint is vest is a weird word.
I agree, I just don't think that
agree.
doing the
I
res
think
and
there's
adding,
unanimity about it being weird, but it's still better than the alternatives, which are weak. So weird, keep it with the theme of the topic, weird versus weak.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Exactly, exactly.
I like the truth isn't even here now.
Yeah, I think the paper described it as a bit of a chaos muppet.
If we would like a version of E with federal government work for those that want Fed.
If you were gonna do federal government, that's the best one to do it with, because it's the most broad for the app, so if the concern is Fed key. So if people want
Although-
that, it would make the most sense.
For that one, so I'm just gonna say this, I think that the two Fed key apps are abortion and I think AI, which means that I would delete non-human in a Fed key.
If you were to make a Fed one.
If I were to make a Fed one, those are the only two that we've identified that I think have a Fed key one.
What about duplicating it, but adding federal government and deleting? So like keep theirs, that they,
Yeah.
they wanna work very hard for, but if
It's
you wanna
creating a
add
new
one
one.
that's FG, add it, but delete non-human.
My
Yeah, that's
complaint
fine.
about a res with FG is not a lot of people watch the topic committee meetings and are probably not thinking about the competition issues like and the Fed key stuff. But a Fed key res looks smaller, but there is no Fed key warrant. And if there is only one Fed key res on the slate, I think we are baking in that that one will most likely win.
Why do we know there's no 15 one? What is the warrant for no 15 warrant?
That's something, it seems like everyone kind of unanimously agrees that there's like.
I guess.
We just haven't seen it, the topic
Yeah.
of claim we
Right,
didn't
okay,
see it.
yeah, again, the Fed key warrant could be out there in the unknown, okay? There are, for instance, if we think patents and ownership potentially have Fed key warrants, there are people who say that animals should be able to own themselves or should be able to own the land around them. There are potential Fed key warrants. Just because we haven't found them doesn't mean they don't exist. So there is an argument for maybe including it.
I
Also,
don't disagree with that, I'm just
Fed courts
worried
versus
like
state courts.
we're placing faith that we'll find it for the app in order to give the neg the state's counter plan. When like the neg has other, like the neg's gonna be fine on this topic, like we've already discussed personhood pick options, we're discussing there's person counter plans, like I don't know why we have to provide the neg with the state's counter plan. Like it'll be a discussion, the app might have states arguments, like I don't know.
I think
one,
small.
it is going to be all over the literature. So it seems like we probably ought to be reading some of that literature. Second, we may have messed something else up here, and I from the get-go have said I don't think that the threshold to the link to some of these personhood disads is so great that the neg is gonna have an awesome net benefit. I think in some circumstances, it would be useful to reserve the opportunity for the state's counterplan. But we now have a larger window of time, once we produce this ballot, for people to investigate that stuff. I do not feel that it is reasonable for us to foreclose and say there's no Fed key warrant when we've had very little time. Like, we've been spending all of our time figuring out what the hell personhood is. We have not had as much of a chance to think through, okay, now that we've figured out sort of what we think personhood or what AI or et cetera are, now let's go looking for Fed key warrants.
So just to clarify, we can leave today with an option on this like working slate that we will decide to vote on Slack. Is that like kind of what you're saying?
No.
So like we have
I'm
to
saying
vote
the
on
community has the time to continue vetting, but if we don't put federal government as one of the options now, we've shut the door on something that.
But I guess kind of the inverse, if we put it on the ballot and then we vet before putting out the slate and decide that is not.
Then people can
Is that
vote
how
not
it's
to
been in previous
include it,
ones?
Federal
to
and
not
governmental
vote for it as the topic. Slash, we can send out an open letter memo saying, by the way.
Federal government is always capitalized in college resolution.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's why I thought it's always been in
Always in
every
the
single
resolutions,
one.
but never in the plans, 'cause it's not an agent.
Or USFG is not an agent.
All right, I have a question about ballots. I mean, is it possible to create the two-step ballot? Do you want United States or United States federal government as the agent? And that's.
No.
that's-
If we have FG, it needs to be the broader regular app because of the lack of. I'm not saying that there are none, I'm just saying that like, if it is, we think we missed something, I think it needs to be, we think we missed something.
Can we also add another, can we make Jackie's also a duplicate with the federal government?
I'm sorry, what did you say, can we what?
Can we copy paste Jackie's into the TBD and add federal
Hey,
government?
you gotta give me a letter.
D. Jackie, do you
One
want?
that says legal persons in it.
The only one that has legal persons in the res, which we have already said
Do
makes
you not
D
want,
and E.
so I'm just saying.
I
duplicate.
want legal persons to be in the res, and I'm arguing that creates some great ground for the neg.
Yeah,
So I don't
no,
know why they.
I'm in agreement with you, but do you? Okay.
Jackie's point is just that that one's already better for the neg, so it's like if you
Okay.
then make a version of that one where they also get states, it compounds.
Okay.
I have two things. One, it has not recognized.
That's not will.
Can't make sense for the United States federal
I
government.
like that.
Because there's less link uniqueness for the spillover DA, i.e. if a bunch of states have recognized something as a legal person, the DA is just worse, right? And it refers to the federal government.
Are we concerned that the states are suddenly gonna recognize a bunch of things as legal persons? Cause
I mean,
That's gonna
states-
nuke all the topics
states-
regardless.
States have already started doing that with
That's like
fetuses.
100% exactly what's gonna happen in like 2 weeks.
There's already states that have started recognizing fetuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like that is already starting to
I'm
happen.
sure I'll take that, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but you could, then just add non-human entities back in.
I think, obviously, you all should decide.
I mean, there ought to be for the legal fetus staff, there ought to be a federal government versus states key debate more. I don't think we should exclude the
Yeah.
only app that might have a Fed keyboard for the sake of the states. If there's a debate because the states are doing, it just ought to be a debate.
It's also
Because that's like one of the two apps that I can only think of two apps for federal government at the moment.
Couldn't it be with a list option? And it's just one that has more categories?
So you want like future gen, like.
Yeah, I'm
more?
saying like have the USFG actor and put artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species, and future generations on the list.
So
I'm okay with that.
I'm sort of concerned about that because actually the other app that I could sort of think of is FedGov recognized municipalities. It's
That's
like
what-
the other half.
But let's
Wait, huh?
exclude municipalities.
Right, no,
I think he was saying.
I'm saying there's only, I could think of 3 apps.
Okay.
If we add the list, we exclude one of those apps. I don't know what the bet. You all can do,
Municipalities are?
there's cards, there's articles in there, I don't know if you cut them, but there's articles that say recognized municipalities.
I don't know if this would be a bad idea, but like, I'm fine to vote for Fed one, like I said, because I get the hardcore I have to be there. The person who wants a federal resolution, can they just say like, here's what we would want the resolution to be? Because I feel like it's a little asinine to write the federal resolution in a way that the person who wants it to say federal. I don't like it.
Yeah, you were one of the 3.
You young Adrian.
I
Why are
said
you
young
adding
and-
people in the third person? Her name's Adrian, she's right there.
Okay. Sorry, it was just like, Young and I were like, we were fine to put one on the ballot, we get why one would want it, so I was just curious if we could just like, Adrian, what is the version of this that you would most like?
I'm actually fine with any of them. I mean, I would personally, like topics that I prefer, I would like the smallest list ones, but I obviously am not gonna win to put it on those necessarily, so I'm not pushing that. I think it makes sense to put it on the broadest ones, so that it has, maybe some angle of ground, but also the app has more leverage to do some more stuff if need be.
So motion to also add a USFG one to future gens, nature, non-human?
Well, should we vote on this one first and then we can vote on that one? Because if this one fails, I don't know if the other one's gonna work. So, motion to vote on resolve the USFG should vest legal rights and or duties in entities it is not recognized as legal persons. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Young is a 6.
I can double check it with them.
So it's at least a 5-4. So we'll count it 5-3 for now. Okay, now we want to write the version. So we think that the version add federal government to is it F is the one you proposed?
That would be
It would be F add AI.
you have to have AI because that is one of the only Fed key apps.
That we know of.
That we
Yes.
know of.
Right, but I think if Adrian wants to propose one without AI, because
Right, that's what you folks asked what my opinion was, and I said, I don't like AI, don't wanna talk about AI, zero interest in AI, I think AI is huge, and would rather not have it in there in the first place, so my preference would be to add FG to F. If folks wanna, like, if that doesn't have support, then
Alright.
we can add FG and AI to F.
resolve the United States federal government should vest legal rights in one or more of the following future generations of humans, nature, and or non-human animal species. Can you raise your hand if you are a yes for that version? Count 1, 2, 3, 4. So we probably need Young on this version.
But they want to duplicate it and add AI.
I would agree with that as well, but I don't know if that gets the votes, because I don't know if the Adrian needs to work.
I mean, I think, do we have an idea, because at the moment there'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
What's one more?
I'll second.
So take a vote on one that says add AI.
Are we gonna get 9? I want 9.
Although we need to figure this out because I think it's 4.
That's how many papers there were. What are 9 things? You wanted to. Sorry. Only Rottenbaum to watch.
All right, this last one. To best legal rights in one of our following: artificial intelligence, future generations of humans, nature, and/or non-human animal species. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, 6, 2.
Oh, I think it's 9.
All right, now we need to actually start approving things for the official ballot. One at a time, because
Have like a 10-minute break so people can
yeah, 10-minute break sounds good.
absorb what we got there.
Yep.
Really? The list with FD? Has AI in it?
Do we have to check it?
Why?
You have a quorum. Oh.
We do need
Everyone
to
knows that.
resolve this.
No, but like, I think that,
Yeah, I think Young may no longer be in there. Like, actually currently presenting.
this is just like.
Okay.
So Canada.
I don't think that. High school conference is.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't.
The AI one?
Travis.
Yeah, it's in it.
Yeah.
There's one,
You know, the middle of all of this.
I think so.
the ones that have no definitions you were right about, brand new ones.
They haven't all of them.
I mean, the barrier thing for us, I get a little bit worried about because I feel
Tomorrow's
like
only
my
when it
students
should
do
be.
assignments.
Just like in the
I like the idea of
think
forcing them to do
the,
research too.
every time we've said,
I
oh
think
yeah, X things
team-wise,
resolved, moving on,
we should
it's
have
never
to
been
say,
resolved, I feel like that's almost a death pill to say it's been resolved. Like if you don't say anything about something and move on, no one will come back to it, and that's what's happened. Like the limiting down to users, no one, I made sure, except for your big health,
Third week.
and then.
Tell Young we're at the phase where it takes 5 votes to remove.
Is when we have our lockdown.
I'm gonna go watch.
And then I get
That's
that
how
from
it works.
So if there are any he votes to remove,
Yeah, that's fine.
So those, that's a 2 week time frame.
that's the thing you.
I mean, part of the goal.
I just said that.
I like the 3 ounce requirement, I feel like you cancel it back out.
Yeah.
Like a drop of water in a water bottle.
Whether it's recorded or people have to, however, we can probably figure it out. But I think setting a time for when practice days are absolutely happening. Students are occurring, we get that down on paper.
I mean, we're gonna need to wait for a while. Process by that point. So I have good or something like that.
Are we muted or unmuted right now?
We're currently unmuted, I will mute us.
Probably also have
Okay. So day 3 working res, procedures to vote off. Means it comes off the ballot, so voting in favor of removal. Takes 5 to remove. Has everybody felt like they've had time to look at all the resolutions? Or do we need a few more minutes? Obviously, we're still waiting on Young on the 4-4.
Yeah, he's just not on.
Yeah, I think
So
Young is
he
currently
said fine with the whole slate when I sent it, so I don't know if that's.
When did you send that?
Okay, can I ask one more time? I was told before the difference was E had no personhood and D did, but they both say legal persons. So can I get one more time what the big difference was?
So E has legal persons for inherency purposes, but not for requirements, so that you have to be inherent. But the pick out of calling the new thing a person is less competitive.
It also has non-human, whereas D would theoretically let you add human entities.
Okay, that difference I understand, I still.
And also,
Person's
class of
parties.
entities gives you a debate over
Do you make them a legal person? Do
having
you make a person?
it's like a set or group, whereas vest legal rights and or duties in non-human entities allows them to
The
not,
do the category.
it allows more subsets to, like,
Like I think
I
it'd
just
be
think for the purposes of labeling, even if they're next to each other and they both say legal persons, the.
Oh, I see what
legal
you're
persons
saying,
and
like,
legal
identify
personhood
the-
is not clear. And I'll understand what you folks think the distinction is.
Yeah, I do also think that it might be worth doing, just like here's our write-up of each.
I think we could do that on Slack before we release it to the community, but we should do the voting.
Yeah, I mean, it also seems like something that we could individually do on Facebook if we wanted or something. I don't know if that needs consensus.
I mean.
I think how we label them on the ballot sort of matters, like broad legal persons, we should probably define what that means, as like a sentence.
You should call the class of entities.
yeah, I was gonna say that should be class of entities, maybe even say no vest legal rights and duties. The
It's
other
like,
one is
yeah.
yes, vest legal rights and duties, no class of entities.
Okay. Start with A. Resolved, United States should vest legal rights and or duties in one or more of the following: artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species. Are there votes? Yeah, okay, we can do it as good. So that
We're supposed to be voting to.
we're supposed to do the opposite. We're supposed to do the vote to remove.
Oh.
So
That was helpful, I got it.
that's what I was like, we can do it either way. So there are 0 votes to remove. So okay. B, vest rights. The United States should vest legal rights in nature and or non-human species. Are there votes to remove? 1 vote. Okay. C. The United States should vest legal rights in one or more of the following: artificial intelligence, nature, non-human animal species.
Can you scroll up again? I'm sorry.
Yep, sorry.
Okay.
So C. Are there any votes to remove? Okay. Oh, I got Clark. Young just sent me a message. Okay, so any votes to remove? C. The list of 3, including best. Okay. All right. D, the broad version. Resolved, the United States should expand the class of entities recognized as legal persons. Are there votes to remove D?
Last reminder, that's the shortest one.
Definitely the shortest one.
Presumption favors the shortest.
Okay.
I don't have a problem with it.
I didn't write the vote count when we first passed it on the ballot, but I think it was the same.
Can I just ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Sorry. Why isn't it classes?
Because class of entities when using the verb expand is how it is used in court cases.
Okay.
It's like you're part of a protected class or whatever.
Okay, I hope we're right.
Does that resolve your concern there, D'Lo?
Because when you say a protected class,
You vote against it?
No.
never mind.
All right, deal. Class of entities that can sue, class of entities that can't. You take the class of entities that can sue and make it bigger.
Got it.
E, resolve the United States should vest legal rights and or duties in non-human entities it is not recognized as legal persons. Jackie votes to remove.
I don't like negative statements in that sense. I would stand by that.
Okay, is there anybody else that votes to remove?
I'm sure if we release something that says that we think that's the best res, everyone will put it last.
Yeah.
I can all but guarantee that.
That's fair. F, vest rights with no duties, the list of 3 without AI. The United States should vest legal rights in one or more of the following: future generations of humans, nature, and or non-human animal species.
Why do we have the and/or in there?
Yeah, you don't need it.
You have one or more of the following.
It does not need to be
delete
deleted.
it, yeah.
I like more and/ors.
Shut up.
So the United States should vest legal rights in one or more of the following: future generations of humans, nature, non-human animal species. I see 2 votes to remove. Okay. G. USFG should vest legal rights and or duties in entities it has not recognized as legal persons. I see 3 votes to remove. Okay. I'm still figuring. Young sent me a vote yes on the tiebreaker one. I sent the clarification of yes to remove or add. I think it's to add. So this is a 5-4 that it was.
Okay, and for both of those, the last and or. Is nothing either.
That's true.
Or the and or.
Okay, so H. Resolved, the United States federal government should vest legal rights in one or more of the following: future generations of humans, nature, non-human animal species. See, 4 votes to remove. 4 votes to stay. 5 votes to stay because Young. So.
I earned money, count those votes. Yeah, we're not gonna get a 3 p.m. the day after.
I think I recorded that right. Young is a yes to add, so. I. The United States federal government should vest legal rights in one or more of the following: artificial intelligence, future generations of humans, nature, non-human animal species. Are there any votes to remove that one? 3.
And I is also.
What was that?
I said I is just rights, or is it rights?
I is just for legal rights.
I was about to say, I would probably vote yes to I, not that it matters because it's on, if it was rights and or duties.
I would prefer it to say that also, but
Yeah,
I don't think it.
Do we want to add one? As a variation of it?
No. I'm not saying that.
I'm more so saying like, would
Why are
people
we
be
taking the vote,
opposed to
though?
that one
Because this is the
including-
final slate, then we just approve the final slate, because.
Do we have a copy of that?
Yeah, it comes up
Okay,
here.
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm
When
asking,
we
is
say
there,
final slate, we still have like grammar check,
Yeah.
Yes.
calm down.
is there a reason I took out duties?
Because I hate duties.
Yeah, because that was the one that was proposed.
Fair enough.
Number C needs a period at the end.
How does grammar fix issue work?
We just,
We're not obligated to release it for quite a while. So
yeah, we don't have to give it to them until July, the beginning, in early July, I think is what the Constitution specifies. Technically, should really be June 30th, because the ballot has to be open for 14 days. We also have to release it on the third Friday in July, which happens to be the 15th. That way, if somebody's like, hey, you all really screwed up the grammar of this, we reserve the right to change. Are there?
Baker, did you see the Baker comment?
Yeah. Yeah, that was a while ago. Ideally, we can do that on via Slack is what we think the distinctions are. Because I know folks have to catch flights before. Does that deal all of them? I can't remember how many there are. Yeah, okay. Are we comfortable with voting on this is the final slate, barring any grammar changes that we can view via Slack? Or we need time to keep looking?
Yeah, like it doesn't seem like, it seems like only the GHI votes are close, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I move to approve the slate without objection. Barring any objection, the TC approves the slate. Done. Thank you all for serving on the committee. I know it's been a long couple of days. Thank you, DCH, for your hospitality, for paying all the meals. Thank you for those of you that participated from home. Thank you for those of you that showed up to the meeting that aren't on the TC for definitely giving us a direction. Giving us the verb fest, yeah. Yeah, that is your all's fault.
I will now absolve you for incidents.
I think a hashtag vest is best.
And this Google Doc is public, right? So you
Yeah,
can
the
share
Google
stuff
Doc is
in here.
public, yep. I don't know if I should post it on Facebook, because I may post it as just like we have grammar changes, but this is the tentative list of reses that were approved at the TC meeting. And then I may wait until we come up with our descriptions of what we think the differences in the resolutions are. Yeah, before I post it publicly, but yeah.
Right, I mean, they can see it, they just,
Yeah.
but let's not post it until we have agreed on the descriptions.
Right.
I'm just gonna post it right now in our Slack so that it can't be edited, because this Google Doc can still be edited.
Yeah.
And I'll pin it.
Yeah, I also think that we should set a deadline for ourselves to have descriptions done. My temptation would be to.
So we want to set, I know some folks are traveling today, some folks are traveling tomorrow. Do we want to set a Tuesday, 8 PM Eastern deadline for comments? And we can sort of do that in the Google Doc, or we could just do that in Slack for the resolutions. I think we have a channel for res ballot, and then we can do it there. Does that sound reasonable? Cool. All right, thank you, everybody. Have safe travels home. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for sharing this.
Thank you.